The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Shut it down! Shut it down!
Demanding ice-free zones, the clashes in the Big Easy as dual crackdowns intensify in the Twin Cities.
I didn't see anything disturbing about it. What's disturbing to me is that millions of Americans have died from drugs being run to America by these cartels.
Any American who sees the video that I saw will see the United States military attacking shipwrecked sailors.
Double tap strikes dissected, an inside look at the U.S. push to eliminate drug cartels and why some say it may have already gone too far.
And now, thanks to the FBI, we know that this defendant was living just miles away from here.
A 30-year-old man now facing charges in a pipe bomb case. How federal investigators say they managed to track the suspect down nearly 5 years later. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, thank you for being here. I'm Dee Gatton, and on this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. Congressional hearings put U.S. military strikes on suspected drug boats under the microscope. Police arrest a pipe bomb suspect after a nearly 5-year manhunt. Time is running out for lawmakers to make a deal on health care subsidies, and the Trump administration threatens to withhold SNAP funding. But first, the Trump administration expanded its immigration crackdown to 2 more American cities this week. DHS agents surging into New Orleans, with officials saying they will seek 5,000 arrests or more, targeting violent criminals released after home invasions, armed robberies, car thefts, and rapes. An immigration operation is also underway in the Twin Cities. The Department of Homeland Security says they are targeting undocumented Somali immigrants, claiming there is widespread fraud, especially marriage fraud, in the Somali community in Minneapolis and elsewhere in the U.S. This as the president tore into the Somali community this week, saying they contribute nothing to the country. National correspondent Matt Gelka reports from Washington.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement launched an operation reportedly targeting Somali nationals in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region of Minnesota Wednesday. The new enforcement coming after the president ripped into the Somali community.
I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you. Okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks. And we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too.
Minnesota is home to the largest Somali community in the country, and the Trump administration is investigating a $1 billion fraud claim in the state where public assistance tax dollars have allegedly been funneled to terrorist organizations based in Somalia. Trump targeted Somali-American Congresswoman Ilhan Omar in his rant.
We're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage.
He's always been a racist, a bigot, a xenophobic, and Islamophobic.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says he welcomes the investigation into the potential fraud from his state, but slammed the targeting of one community.
My message is simple on this. You commit fraud in Minnesota, you're going to prison. I don't care what color you are, what religion you are. Sitting on the sidelines and throwing out accusations, and let's be very clear, demonizing an entire population and lying to people about the safety and security of this state is beneath that.
Republicans have increasingly blamed Walz for the fraud scandal.
Tim Walz refuses to take accountability for the fraud he created and enabled. President Trump is committed to justice for the crimes against the taxpayers of Minnesota.
Critics say the ICE crackdown on the Somali community is a waste of time and money because the overwhelming majority of Somalis living in Minnesota are naturalized U.S. citizens, according to census data. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The Trump administration's surge of Border Patrol agents to North Carolina resulted in over 425 arrests in the Charlotte area. This according to new information from the Department of Homeland Security. The Charlotte operation officially launched on November 15th with a goal to target, quote, the worst of the worst criminals. By November 17th, more than 130 people had been arrested, with that number jumping to over 250 by the following night, according to the report. As of November 20th, DHS claimed agents had arrested around 370 illegal aliens, Officials have so far declined to identify the names and alleged crimes of a majority of the people detained. To Washington, D.C., where a federal judge has ruled that federal agents should stop arresting people without a warrant unless they can show that a suspect was at risk of fleeing. Under federal law, immigration officers can only make a warrantless arrest if they have probable cause to believe that someone is in the country illegally and that they are likely to flee before an arrest warrant can be obtained. Last week, a federal judge in Denver issued a similar ruling that determined immigration agents had acted unlawfully by arresting immigrants without showing proof they posed a flight risk. Navy Admiral Frank Bradley appeared on Capitol Hill Thursday to brief lawmakers about a follow-up strike in September on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean. The meeting taking place behind closed doors with leaders of the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees. The meeting comes following a report from the Washington Post that the second strike targeted survivors clinging to the vessel. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, reports.
The report from the Washington Post claimed that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth gave a, quote, kill them all order during that operation on September 2nd in the Caribbean. But Admiral Bradley saying Thursday there was no such order. Lawmakers also seeing video of the follow-up strikes for the very first time. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle sharing different opinions Thursday after meeting with Admiral Bradley, who is in charge of the September 2nd operation in the Caribbean targeting alleged drug traffickers.
The first strike, the second strike, and the third and the fourth strike on September 2nd were entirely lawful and needful.
Admiral Bradley has a storied career, and he has my respect, and he should have the respect of all of us. But what I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service.
Bradley appearing on Capitol Hill along with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, to answer questions about the September operation following a report from the Washington Post that a follow-up strike was carried out on a pair of survivors at the directive from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. But Bradley telling lawmakers there was no, quote, kill them all order.
These are narco-terrorists who are trafficking drugs that are destined for the United States to kill thousands of Arkansans and millions of Americans.
Bradley reportedly telling lawmakers the two survivors of the first strike were considered legitimate targets for a follow-up attack because their vessel was still believed to contain illegal drugs and they were attempting to salvage them. Some Democratic lawmakers saying the video was disturbing.
I think it'd be hard to watch this series of videos and not be troubled by it.
Now, Bradley also detailing that a total of 4 strikes were conducted, killing 11. Senator Cotton confirming a judge advocate general was present in the command center with Bradley during the operation. The information being revealed is some have called the follow-up strike a potential war crime, while others have backed the military's actions.
Whether this kind of action constituted a war crime, I can't think of a more serious accusation that could be made.
The bottom line is this is a war. The narco-terrorists are poisoning Americans, and if we have to destroy them and kill them to stop them doing that, then that's all part of this war.
Now, Thursday's meeting comes the same day the U.S. military carried out its 22nd strike on a suspected drug vessel, killing 4 narco-terrorists. The investigation into September's follow-up strikes remains ongoing, but no specific date has been set for the next hearing on the matter. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
The United States military already has a significant presence of assets in the Caribbean for a potential strike on Venezuela. Let's take a look. Around 15,000 military personnel and thousands of Marines and Special Operations Forces have been deployed. More than a dozen warships and destroyers are stationed in the Latin American waters, along with the Navy's largest and most advanced aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, that was moved in last month. That holds more than 70 aircraft, including several F-35 Lightning fighter jets, plus a nuclear-powered submarine, and nearly 200 Tomahawk cruise missiles are in place as part of Operation Southern Spear, which is the largest military deployment in the region in decades. Meantime, the State Department is renewing its advisory for Americans not to travel to Venezuela, telling all U.S. citizens do not travel to or remain in Venezuela due to the high risk of wrongful detention, torture in detention, terrorism, kidnapping, arbitrary enforcement of local laws, crime, civil unrest, and poor health infrastructure. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he can't agree to some of the proposals in the U.S. plan to end the war in Ukraine, according to the Associated Press. This as Russia warns that they will seize the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine in any case, including militarily. Russia currently has the area annexed, but not fully conquered. Ukraine doesn't want to cede any land to Russia in a peace deal. Talks are ongoing between Russian, Ukrainian, and U.S. officials. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services shortened the work permit duration from 5 years to 18 months for asylum seekers, citing security concerns. The agency says shorter windows will force more frequent background checks to detect fraud and security threats. The change comes a week after DHS says an Afghan national ambushed National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. A grand jury has rejected a new mortgage fraud indictment against New York Attorney General Letitia James. According to the Associated Press, federal prosecutors went back to the grand jury Thursday after a judge halted the prosecution of James and former FBI Director James Comey. That judge ruled U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, the prosecutor who brought the charges, was unlawfully appointed. James and Comey have denied any wrongdoing and characterized the prosecutions as political revenge by President Trump. Coming up after nearly 5 years, how law enforcement says they identified the suspect in the pipe bomb case.
A woman killed only days before she was set to give birth. What led Michigan investigators to arrest her own mother in this shocking case? That's next. Now to a disturbing case out of Wexford County, Michigan. A mother and stepfather have now been charged with the murder of their own 22-year-old pregnant daughter, Rebecca Park.
They brought Rebecca Park to their home. They forced her into a vehicle and took her into the woods where they stabbed her, forced her to lie on the ground while they cut her baby out of her, ultimately causing her death and the death of the baby.
A horrific crime. The suspects, Courtney and Brad Bartholomew, now facing several charges that, if they are convicted, could land them a life sentence. Now, a motive here is still under an official investigation. Family, friends, and community members who spent weeks searching for Park now say they simply want to see justice for both Rebecca and her baby. She was just days away from giving birth when she was killed.
The FBI has arrested a suspect in the D.C. pipe bomb investigation. They say this man that you see right there, Brian Cole Jr., planted pipe bombs near the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters the night before the January 6th Capitol riot. Earlier this week, I spoke with former FBI agent Dr. R.J. Toledo to discuss.
According to Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel, it was detailed, old-fashioned investigative work examining every clue that led to the arrest we learned of today. In a case like this, are you surprised by today's developments?
Anytime that a case starts going cold as an investigator, you know that the probability of solving it starts to decrease. So it was a bit surprising, the news today, given how little evidence they seemed to gather at the time. But hey, this is what all good investigators do. They stick with the case until it's solved, no matter how long it takes. And this is something that the FBI specializes in, really.
I mean, you remember the time in 2021, everyone was wearing masks. You saw the surveillance video, to your point there. Historically, in cases like this, is it one major clue or a body of evidence that leads to an arrest?
Well, in this case, the huge obstacle they had from the get-go was identifying who this person that was involved was. To narrow that down from an impossibly large number of possibilities to at least a few people who it could be, that's what investigators really had to go through a lot of the painstaking work. In this case, it seemed like they were trying to match cell phone records of people in the area and then trying to match that with purchases of the components that were used for the device. This is something that it took a really long time. And once they did that, the elements start then coming together after that.
Search warrants have been and are currently being executed. I would assume the investigators will be looking into the suspect's home, work history, possible DNA, right?
Yeah, first and foremost, the focus is going to be on confirming in every possible way that the subject is the one that committed the crime. It's about then, after that, building this case for court. So they're going to look at every single aspect of his life to piece together the motives, the reasons behind why he wanted to commit this crime, social media, any groups that he was a part of, friendships, anything he was talking about. What possibly led up to him being motivated to do something like this?
Yeah, was it political? The timing of it all questions that we know hopefully will be answered soon. Former FBI agent Dr. R.J. Toledo, thank you for joining us tonight on the National News Desk.
Thank you.
Hong Kong officials are setting up an independent committee to determine the cause of the deadly apartment complex fire last week. This comes as police say more bodies of victims were found, bringing the death toll to at least 159 people. About 30 are still missing and 40 people remain hospitalized. Authorities say the committee will make recommendations to the city to ensure a fire like this doesn't happen in the future. In Kentucky, 2 wrongful death lawsuits claim last month's deadly UPS plane crash happened because the company put profit over safety. The suits claim the company kept flying older aircraft without increasing maintenance beyond what is regularly scheduled. UPS didn't comment on the lawsuits but said safety is its top priority. 14 people, including 11 on the ground, died when the plane plowed into businesses just outside of the Louisville airport. The search for Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 has been revived. This comes more than a decade after it vanished without a trace, becoming one of aviation's biggest mysteries. American marine robotics company Ocean Infinity says it will resume the seabed hunt on December 30th. It's unclear if the company has new information about the plane's location. Ocean Infinity will be paid $70 million only if wreckage is discovered. TSA is cracking down on traveler identification. Starting soon, if you show up to an airport checkpoint without an acceptable form of identification, like a real ID or a passport, you'll be hit with a $45 fee just to get cleared to fly. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And it's a great topic, Emma, because many people are obviously they're traveling this time of year. What do travelers need to know?
Yeah, so it starts on February 1st, and people who are traveling, like you said, without a real ID or who don't have another form of the acceptable IDs, like a passport, they're going to have to pay $45 to verify their identity through what TSA is calling their alternative Confirm ID system. They said they were going to originally only charge $18, but they realized that the system's actually going to cost a lot more, so that's where that $45 price tag comes into play.
And we always talk about requirements at the airport, but the reality is you need an ID for pretty much everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to rent a car, you need to have a valid driver's license or a government ID. There's no exceptions for that. You also can't book a hotel room without showing up with an ID at check-in. That's pretty much just standard nationwide to prevent fraud and verify who's actually staying there. And then also when it comes to your finances, I mean, federal laws require that banks verify your identity before even opening an account. Also buying a home. Under federal anti-fraud rules, you need to present a government-issued ID at closing before you can buy a house or sign a mortgage. So it really just plays into everything.
Yeah, and then of course voting, which we'll get into in just a few moments. Later on, Emma's going to be back to break down the federal regulations on voter ID and how the laws differ by state.
Coming up next, a nightmare for a Rhode Island community comes to an end. How investigators put a stop to a robbery spree that began over a year ago. Plus, how a new startup is using artificial intelligence to help people facing cognitive decline. We'll be right back. National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Rhode Island, where a suspect in a years-long robbery spree has finally been arrested.
A years-long crime spree finally rerouted by police.
Very scary.
Body cam footage obtained by NBC 10 shows Cranston police arresting 36-year-old Kivery Alston outside his Amazon-branded delivery truck Tuesday night.
If you make any sudden moves, you could be shot, okay?
You can still see him wearing his Amazon jacket. Amazon tells us it's looking into it. noting drivers are hired by outside partner companies or work as independent contractors.
He was coming out of Amazon, so he was leaving Amazon.
That's the last thing you would expect because everybody does everything by Amazon now. And that's what's pretty scary.
Cranston police say Alston is a suspect in at least 6 robberies in their city and more than a dozen across Johnston, Providence, and Woonsocket.
Tilly, what was a recent moment that made you smile?
You just heard Sunny, the name of AI technology used to chat with people facing or concerned about cognitive decline. Babak Parviz is the CEO and co-founder of the company called New Days AI. The startup has launched in 4 states: Washington, California, Florida, and Texas. Like you heard earlier, it has basic conversations, but also challenges users with puzzles to keep their minds active.
So here's how it works. I'll say 2 simple words, and your job is to remember those words and make a sentence or 2 with them.
Its reach can be extremely large.
Come February 3rd, the Department of Homeland Security will be terminating temporary protected status for Haitian nationals, also known as TPS.
The announcement feels like a door closing at a time Haitian families, are already fighting to survive.
Pastor Elites Doubter serves a large Haitian population in South Florida. He says the decision hits hard, especially in the Sunshine State, where nearly a third of TPS holders reside.
And ending TPS doesn't just shift policy, it shakes homes. It disrupts stability and it places parents, children, and workers in a position of fear.
This after officials determine Haiti no longer meets TPS requirements.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, one of America's top-selling beer slipping in sales, how the White House is shifting happy hour trends, and holiday hiring slumps. The economic factors playing a role in employment trends. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. The draw for the FIFA Men's World Cup was held on Friday in Washington, D.C. 16 cities in the United States, Canada, and Mexico will host the tournament next summer. Plus, babies as young as 7 months will now have access to cochlear implants. The FDA has approved expanding the use to infants who are diagnosed with permanent hearing loss at birth. And a raccoon broke into a Virginia liquor store and helped himself to some drinks earlier this week. Look at this mess. When police arrived, they found the very drunk animal passed out on a bathroom floor. You just saw the photo there. Officers gave the masked bandit a chance to sleep off his hangover before releasing him, there you go, back into the wild. Looks like he had a time. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. President Trump's immigration crackdown is impacting the sale of Constellation Brands, the U.S. owner of Modelo Especial and Corona. But research shows that market has been hit hard by Trump's deportation push. Modelo has lost its top-selling beer spot to Michelob Ultra, and Constellation sales have plunged. Its stock is down nearly 40% just this year. Stores are expected to hire fewer seasonal workers this holiday season. That's according to a recent survey from the National Retail Federation. Hiring is expected to be up to 40% less. Retailers cite economic uncertainty as a driving force for the decline. Experts also say fewer full-time employees are quitting their jobs, meaning there's less need for seasonal workers. There will soon be fewer places to pick up a Grand Slam breakfast. Denny's is now shuttering more of its restaurants nationwide, starting with the spots that have been underperforming. The chain hasn't confirmed which locations will be affected. Denny's says it was taken private by a group for $620 million. We're told the decision to close more of its diners came prior to the buyout. So to come on the National News Desk, Congress moves to curb AI regulations. Why lawmakers claim the renewed effort is a matter of national security. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We have a responsibility before the end of the year to pass a bill that will address the issue of healthcare costs in this country.
The clock is ticking for Congress to figure out a solution to skyrocketing health care costs. The extension being proposed as lawmakers continue to disagree. Plus, a funding fight over food stamps back in the national spotlight. What the USDA is demanding several Democratic-led states hand over or else.
What we are seeing today is unprecedented in scope and intensity.
A surge in threats against law enforcement amid President Trump's controversial crime and immigration crackdown. Law enforcement experts tell Congress what needs to change. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for being here. And time is running out for Congress to find an answer on health care costs as millions of Americans covered under the Affordable Care Act face skyrocketing coverage costs at the end of the year. National correspondent Matt Gelka reports from Washington.
The nonpartisan Government Accountability Office made up 20 fake people to try and get Affordable Care Act coverage heading into 2025. The office's new report showed as of September, 18 still had coverage, with the government paying insurance companies $10,000 a month for the fake enrollees' enhanced premium tax credits. Republicans say the report is a smoking gun for a broken system.
If you're going to have all of these subsidies flying out, you're going to have rampant fraud. And look, importantly, Democrats have been saying we need to give more money to insurance companies.
Nearly 20 million Americans have the enhanced premium subsidies that make health care more affordable and are set to expire at the end of the year. The program costs more than $120 billion and was at the center of the recent government shutdown, with Democrats advocating to get them extended as millions face skyrocketing health care coverage costs. The GAO's report also found potentially misused and overused Social Security numbers throughout the system, along with numbers for dead people still receiving coverage. While critics say the report shows how easy it is to defraud the system, the problem of health care costs remains for millions.
Enough. We have a responsibility before the end of the year to pass a bill that will address the issue of health care costs in this country.
A bipartisan group of 35 House Republicans and Democrats pitched their solution to the looming problem. Their bill would extend the premium tax credits for 2 years with a future vote on further reforms.
The affordability crisis is crippling the American dream, and we have to act. Healthcare costs are the #1 issue that American families are struggling with every single day.
There's no indication yet that bill will even get a vote. Meanwhile, Senate Democrats are looking to force a vote next week on a 3-year extension of the subsidies. It would need 60 votes to pass, but it's unlikely it would have enough Republican support. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The number of people filing for unemployment in the U.S. fell last week. The Labor Department says roughly 191,000 people applied for benefits last week. That was down from 218,000 the week before, and it was the lowest level since September 2022. Another report out today, or earlier this week, I should actually say, shows employers have cut about 1.1 million jobs this year, the most since the pandemic. This data comes as the Federal Reserve will decide next week whether to lower interest rates. The Treasury Secretary says he thinks the Trump administration can recreate its tariff agenda, even if the Supreme Court strikes it down. Last month, the High Court heard arguments about whether emergency law can give President Trump broad tariff authority. CNBC reports Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says using the 1962 Trade Act allows the president to permanently recreate the exact tariff structure. For the 9th straight month, the U.S. manufacturing sector contracted in November. The Institute for Supply Management reported a PMI reading of 48.2. Any number below 50 is a contraction, and that was down 0.5 points from October. The ISM says wide-ranging U.S. tariffs are the main reason for the contraction.
I believe that at some point in the not-too-distant future, you won't even have income tax to pay, because the money we're taking in is so great, it's so enormous, that you're not going to have income tax to pay.
President Trump again saying this week that federal income taxes could be eliminated soon due to tariff revenue. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a nonprofit organization, says the U.S. brought in roughly $195 billion in tariff revenue in the 2025 fiscal year. The Congressional Budget Office projected the government would bring in over $2.5 trillion in individual income taxes in the 2025 fiscal year. A record number of shoppers went after deals in stores and online over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. We've got some numbers to tell you about. The National Retail Federation says nearly 203 million consumers participated in the 5-day shopping event, a marathon, with Black Friday seeing the biggest crowds. That is up from the 197 million in the previous year. This year's record exceeds the organization's initial prediction of about 187 million shoppers. Cyber Monday alone reached record heights. Adobe Analytics reports shoppers spent a record $14.25 billion online. That's up about 7% year over year, and more than the company's initial forecast of just $14.2 billion. Data shows consumers spent $16 million every minute during peak shopping hours. As the holidays quickly approach, so are shipping deadlines for gifts. This is important for procrastinators especially. USPS ground and first-class mail to be delivered before Christmas Day need to be shipped by December 18th. Note to self, FedEx recommends shipping between December 17th and 23rd for home delivery by Christmas Eve. UPS recommends shipping by December 19th for 3-day select or December 22nd for second or next day air. Congress is reworking a push to block states from regulating artificial intelligence. Semaphore is reporting that the White House and House Republicans are aiming to include in the must-pass defense policy bill language do just that. There are many on both sides of the aisle that oppose the idea. Congress is unlikely to allow the National Defense Authorization Act bill to go down because of AI. It's been a long-time push among some Republicans and President Trump. 3 former West Virginia educators have been found in violation of the state's Human Rights Act after admitting to disability-based discrimination against special needs students. Court documents show former Berkeley County special needs teacher Christina Lester and aides June Urish and Kristen Dowdy admitted to harassment, degrading comments, and emotional abuse. Our Washington, D.C. station WJLA first exposed the abuse in 2018 when a mother placed a hidden recorder in her child's hair barrette, capturing how students were being treated inside Berkeley Elementary School in Martinsburg. Investigative reporter Scott Taylor spoke with a mom who had a student in the class about the changes she helped make after.
The benefits was definitely the laws that were passed, the cameras that had to be installed to help give families and children a layer of protection.
The women are now permanently banned from teaching or working with special needs children. Lawmakers are scrambling after the Secretary of Agriculture said 21 states, all run by Democrats, risk losing access to federal funding for the SNAP program. The Trump administration claims the states are refusing to comply with an order to share data on SNAP recipients. National correspondent Christine Frizzell reports.
According to the Department of Agriculture, waste, fraud, and abuse of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program has been widespread and rampant.
When we found 186,000 dead people or dead people's Social Security numbers being used, 500,000 people receiving benefits more than twice. We had a couple of people receiving benefits in 6 states.
SNAP, often referred to as food stamps, is meant to help those who need assistance putting food on the table. 42 million Americans currently rely on the program. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins announcing federal funding will be cut next week to 21 Democratic-led states which have not complied with a request for data on SNAP recipients to be turned over to her agency. New York Governor Kathy Hochul responding, why is the Trump administration hell-bent on seeing people go hungry, as other Democrats have for months slammed the cuts already in place?
We're going backwards on hunger. We are going to have more families struggling to keep food in the fridge, more hungry kids, more red tape for working parents who are just trying to cook a healthy meal for their kids.
But the USDA is calling for major reforms, including requiring participants to reapply and highlighting states like Minnesota, which was recently found to not be using a state law to pause payments to those suspected of fraud. And Maryland already has to spend $240 million more in state funds in 2027 due to its high overpayment and underpayment error rate, a penalty included in President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill. Under President Biden, the program saw its largest permanent increase, with some changes slammed by Republicans.
We saw $524 million of SNAP benefits being used at fast food restaurants in only 9 states. And guess what, Stuart? Those 9 states are blue states. Yeah. That's a lot of money on nuggets and fries.
More than a dozen states have sued the Trump administration, arguing the data request is illegal and is actually the White House attempting to access information on undocumented immigrants. Secretary Rollins says the federal money will start being withheld next week. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
The TSA will soon start charging travelers who don't have a real ID or passport when flying. This comes as government photo IDs have become a necessary part of living, working, and just getting around the United States. Let's go to Em Withrow from the Fact Check team. And photo ID requirements, as you know, they've been a particularly hot button issue when it comes to voting. Where does it stand at this point?
Yeah, so according to Ballotpedia, right now 36 different states require voters to present an ID to vote at the polls on Election Day. Now, these states, of them, 24 required voters to present a photo ID, and then 12 accepted other forms of ID. You can see here on that map on your screen, it shows the states in color. They're the ones with voter ID laws. And then the 14 states that are in gray, they don't have any laws requiring an ID to vote at the polls on Election Day.
And as you take a look at that map, it's my understanding some of the heavily Democratic states, they have slightly more lenient laws when it comes to voting?
Definitely. Yeah, states like California, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Oregon, and Washington, they don't require an ID for most voters at the polls unless you're a first-time voter who registered by mail under federal law. So bottom line, ID really isn't just a travel document anymore. It's kind of the key to basic participation in American society, and it really controls whether you can travel, work, bank, vote, rent a car, buy a gun, buy a home, all those sorts of things.
Emma, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And for more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to Emma's sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. So to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the state of the economy to claims of small businesses defrauding the federal government.
And welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The economy is hemorrhaging jobs, new data says, but some see it as a bearer of good news. National correspondent Audra Elnishar, why is that?
Well, Steve, a worsening job market increases the likelihood that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates again when they hold their final meeting of the year next week. Now, the number of layoffs is so high, more than 1.1 million so far this year, that the country hasn't seen anything like it since the beginning of the pandemic. And we all remember what that was like for jobs. This is a 54% increase also from this point last year. And this is all according to the outplacement firm Challenger Grand Christmas. Now, we are also getting this from another private firm, ADP. They just found that last month alone, the private sector cut 32,000 jobs, and the vast majority of those came from small businesses with fewer than 50 people. Now, more interest rate cuts are expected, not just likely in next week, but after that, because that's when President Trump will appoint the next Fed chair after Jay Powell's term expires. That'll happen early next year. And this week, Steve, the president hinted at who he'll pick.
I guess a potential Fed chair is here, too. I don't know. Are we allowed to say that? Potential. He's a respected person, that I can tell you. Thank you, Kevin.
President referring to Kevin Hassett. He is the current director of the President's National Economic Council. And Hassett says if he's asked, he's very much willing to do the job.
National correspondent Audra Elnishar, thank you. Meanwhile, as a part of our Waste Watch series, we're also looking into a program meant to help small businesses, especially those considered to have what's referred to as a special status and therefore often get preferential treatment when it comes to government contracts. National correspondent Christine Frizzau, it turns out many of those companies getting millions of dollars from the federal government were actually deceiving the government.
Yeah, that's right, Steve. So these are companies connected to the Small Business Administration. The special status maybe means they were minority owned or veteran owned. And oftentimes that meant that they got preferential treatment or priority in terms of getting these government contracts. Now, this was part of a push during the last few decades to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion to support many of these small businesses. Well, it turns out as soon as many of these businesses were awarded a government contract, they'd pocket a percentage of the money, and then they'd have a large corporation take the rest and actually do the job. Well, this totally goes against the whole point of helping minority-owned small businesses. Peter Schweitzer and his folks at the Government Accountability Institute have been looking into this, and here's what he told me.
It will be sometimes one or two individuals who fit the criteria, the DEI criteria. They set up the LLC. A few months later, they bid on a government contract and get that contract in part because they fit this DEI criteria. But they don't actually do any of the work. They don't have the capability. They don't have the personnel. They don't have the skill set.
So again, a major corporation is instead doing the work. These so-called small businesses, they're LLCs, they're really just sort of pass-throughs, but this comes at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer. And by the way, despite President Trump sort of railing against DEI and saying he's going to get rid of this is very much something that is still alive and well. It's still going on. We expect to bring much more in some coverage of this next week.
National correspondents Christine Frizzell, Audra Elnishar, thank you both for your hard work. Back to you.
To Capitol Hill, where Congress examined the rising attacks on law enforcement in the wake of the horrific shooting of 2 National Guard members last week. Here's national correspondent Kayla Gaskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The House Homeland Security Committee meeting Wednesday on Capitol Hill to examine the surge in threats and violent attacks on law enforcement at the local, state, and federal level.
What we are seeing today is unprecedented in scope and intensity.
The hearing comes as concerns are growing that political anger over President Trump's crime crackdown and immigration policies is increasingly being taken out on the rank and file officers and agents who enforce them, such as the shooting of 2 National Guardsmen in D.C. last week.
Those who wear the badge are human beings whose dedication to safeguarding our country should never make them targets.
Last year, 352 law enforcement officers were shot in the line of duty. 50 were killed. The Department of Homeland Security data shows an 1,100% increase in assaults and violence on ICE agents.
Calling officers Nazis and Gestapo, it better stop right now. You are inflaming dangerous circumstances.
Like this from Texas Democrat Jasmine Crockett.
When I see ICE, I see slave patrols.
Also, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz comparing law enforcement to Hitler's secret police.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets.
And this from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
I do not invoke the specter of Nazis lightly. I'm watching with a foreboding dread what is happening in our country right now.
There is no Nazis acting in the law enforcement community of this country, and we are certainly not living in 1939 Germany.
Democrats pushing back on the mostly one-sided criticism of Wednesday's hearing by bringing up the violence of the riots at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021.
Their statements about protecting police officers are hypocritical.
Law enforcement experts say these threats add to existing recruitment and retention challenges and pose serious national security concerns. On Capitol Hill, I'm Kayla Gaskins, reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Cell phone bans now going global. French President Emmanuel Macron endorsing the idea after a new study by the journal Pediatrics reveals rising depression levels among teens who have smartphones. South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia also ban phones in schools. Brazil is now restricting social media use for 16-year-olds. Here in the U.S., measures meant to protect kids online have failed in recent years. Up next, Texas beefs up their flood warning preparations following last summer's deadly disaster. Why some say the upgrades are too little, too late. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America. And we start in Pennsylvania, where some homeless shelters are at capacity during the winter storm.
The Bethesda Mission is one of multiple homeless shelters across Harrisburg, and like many, it has reached its limit.
We've been in capacity for about the last 3 years straight. Yes, we are. We're at our capacity right now.
But despite being at capacity, the organization is doing everything it can to keep its doors open to new faces who need to escape the cold.
What we do is we try to do what we can. So for some people, that might mean getting them a winter jacket, getting them some clothes, recommending to them another service, another ministry in the area to provide whatever we can.
We don't have a time limit on the guests, we have a performance limit. So as long as an individual is pursuing the goals that they have decided upon with their life coach and they're working towards those things, we will keep them there until they can get those things accomplished.
Nearly 5 months after the Hill Country flooding disaster, residents we spoke with say a flood warning system with sirens can't come soon enough. This past summer, lawmakers passed several flood preparedness bills, including one that mandates the installation of outdoor warning sirens in flash flood-prone areas. The governor signed it into law in September, but so far, nothing has been installed.
It just seems shocking that it has not been funded yet by the state. This needs to get done, particularly with the summer camps coming back online next year. And look, they're asking the camps to comply with some really high bars.
Terry Hall with We the People Liberty in Action says steps need to happen now.
They're asking the camps to comply with all these things by, basically next May, because that's when the camps would normally start coming online. And yet here the state hasn't done its job in making sure that that siren goes in.
A psychology course essay written by an OU student is in the spotlight after the student received a 0. According to the OU chapter of Turning Point USA, the 650-word essay was written by Samantha Fulnecki for an assignment about how people are perceived based on society's expectations of gender roles. According to TPUSA OU, Fulnecki cited the Bible throughout her essay to support her claims that eliminating gender in society would be, quote, detrimental because that would put people, quote, farther from God's original plan for humans. Fulnecki reached out to Turning Point USA chapter faculty advisor Gary Barksdale for help. He says while he himself wouldn't have given the paper an A, it did not deserve a 0.
Still ahead here, the Winter Olympic uniforms are officially unveiled. A first look at how Team USA will be traveling to Italy in style. Plus, a once priceless artifact sold to the highest bidder, the jaw-dropping amount paid to house a piece of history. New details. Ralph Lauren unveiled the Team USA uniforms for the opening and closing ceremonies of the upcoming Winter Olympics in Italy. Check it out here. The company spent 2.5 years on the uniforms, which were made entirely in the U.S. This is the 10th Olympics in a row Ralph Lauren has designed Team USA's uniforms. The opening and closing ceremonies are set for February 6th and 22nd. Also, a rare crystal Fabergé egg sold for more than $30 million at auction. Here it is right here. The over 100-year-old winter clear quartz egg was made in St. Petersburg, Russia. Fabergé only made 50 eggs for Russian czars Alexander III and Nicholas II. They were commissioned as Easter gifts between 1885 and 1916. 7 remain in private ownership. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Just check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton here in Washington. And from all of us here, have a great week. We'll see you on Monday.